Welcome to the upstreamlife.com, a podcast that celebrates business transformation in India and the world over. I love SMEs. I love businesses that last long. And I have with me Jahan, who is also the founder of Boheco, or the Bombay Hemp Company as we know it. Okay, I love hemp. Okay, many have used it over the years, also for medicinal properties, ladies and gentlemen. Hemp has its origins in Ayurveda. And Jahan is going to tell us how he built the company in 2013 and how he's grown it. By the way, from their website, hemp is an agro-based product, right? It's agro, obviously, it is from nature. So therefore, Boheco is an agro-based enterprise, reimagining the future of Indian agriculture and bringing in sustainable practices with them. And hemp is their focus. Hemp uses a lot of properties that are great for your health. Let me tell you why it's a kaleidoscope. Pull its fiber out and it'll give you yarn, chop it into softwood, it'll give you material to build shelter, and study its genetics, and you'll find medicine. And that's what Boheco is doing. And Jahan's going to tell us about it. Jahan, thank you for being on the upstreamlife.com. And let's speak about your journey. What's up with you?
Thank you so much, Vishal. It's a great pleasure to be a part of this story and journey, and it's been quite a roller coaster. Honestly, it's been 9 going on 10 years where we began as just an idea. Just as a bit of background, Boheco as the idea began about 2010-11 when back then seven of us co-founders were part of a larger group where we did a lot of social enterprise work during our college days, and we used to travel across India doing solar electrification as one of the first phases of the work we did. But wherever we went, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, whichever rural part we went, we saw that everything changed: custom, culture, language, everything except one thing. That was cannabis, or what we call bhang colloquially, was growing everywhere, and it was just growing wild, like unused. So it immediately kind of struck an idea that, okay, is this just a hidden resource that is just lying to waste, that only a narcotics guy is going to come and burn this and no one else is using this? So we started digging a bit deeper and we realized, no, that wasn't the case. That historically in India, what we call cannabis or hemp has been part of our civilization for thousands and thousands of years. Where, for example, the Elephanta caves in just right off the coast of Mumbai, they preserved themselves because they had used the fiber of hemp or cannabis 1500 years ago, and they mixed it with the lime or the sort of the filling, and actually helped preserve the integrity of it. And whilst doing this, we realized whether it's villages in Punjab that use the hemp seed oil to cure stretch marks in pregnancy, or villages in Uttarakhand that consume the hemp seed as sort of a local delicacy, but something very nutritious with their chutney because it has all the fats and omega acids that they require. And of course, as we commonly know, bhang has that retail use, but it also has a traditional Ayurvedic medical use. So that kind of unique proposition, that is something latent, hidden in plain sight, that lies within this realm of gray, it's neither black nor white, really triggered something in our minds. And it led to sort of a second moment of epiphany where I traveled to Australia, West Australia specifically, to meet with my extended family. And we're doing a road trip, and town after town we kept seeing was, decrepit, no development, absolutely nothing happening. And it's quite obvious that alcoholism, drug consumption was rampant in rural parts of West Australia, just around Perth and the coast side. There's one town called Margaret River, and it was just prosperous, it was thriving. So I was curious, I went to the locals and asked them, what are you doing different? And they said, but we do two things different. We grow grapes, that is for wine, and today Margaret River is one of the top wine counties in the world. And we grow cannabis or hemp for everything else. We use the fiber for our surfboards, we use the seeds for our salads, we use the bud for our medicine. And it sort of was one of those eureka moments when you say a small town in Australia, rural Australia, was able to harness an idea that historically belonged in our backyards in India. Why isn't someone making an attempt to at least to build an ecosystem around this? And that's sort of where the I would say the genesis of Boheco first began. We of course graduated college 2011.
How many of you at the time? How many of you at the time? And do you want to name all of them?
Sure. We would be happy to. We started as 7 co-founders. There's myself, Chirag. I'm a chief strategy officer. We have Chirag, our CEO. We have Avnish, our CRO, and of course all co-founders. We have Sumit and Yash. So Sumit, our CEO, and Yash, our CMO, and Delzad, our CLO, along with Sanbar, who is now sort of pursuing professional academic opportunities in Stanford, and sort of living and thriving in that domain. All coming from our work together as a Boheco family, and very glad to have taken this journey so far with some of the finest men I know as well. So it was a great journey, and I think the people who you take the journey with matter as much as the journey itself. It's been fantastic, Vishal. I mean, when we started, we were the first ever company in India actually looking to explore hemp or cannabis. So the first thing we sat down with in the first 6 months is it even legal to be in this business? So we read through the NDPS Act. We actually reached out to the central ministries, requested for meetings, and we were fortunate that the bureaucrats are big believers. Early days of this young progressive India that is willing to sort of challenge the frontiers. And
This was in 2013, Jahan. 2013.
That's correct, Vishal. So
I'm
that was in
glad. I'm
2013.
glad you straight away went and said that. Let's look at the regulations about this. Right. That's the first piece to solve. Right. So you want to talk about the
Absolutely.
act? What's the act called? Is it the Narcotics Act? That's all.
That's correct, Vishal. So it's called the NDPS Act, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. A bit of brief background: it was created in 1985 for a larger umbrella organization in ambit by which narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. So this isn't only cannabis or ganja. This is also your opium, your methamphetamines, heroin, codeine, morphine, pharmaceutical drugs, all derived from different precursors and mechanisms. But whilst reading the act, what we realized is very interesting, that the definition of cannabis excluded the leaf, the seed, and the fiber. So what is defined as a narcotic is only the bud or the flower and the resin from it. So what we call ganja is actually what is a narcotic. But the leaf, what we call bhang, is not. The seed of the same plant is not. The fiber is not. The moment we realized that this A existed in the definition, we went to the regulators and said, does this mean what we think it means? Does this mean that there are other sections within the NDPS Act that say very specifically, there's section 10 and section 14 that allow, and I'm sure through your history you will realize that there are a lot of acts that are concurrent in nature, where the state governments have the prerogative and central governments just give a sort of a broad guideline that this is the general do's and don'ts. So that's where we realized that there were sections that allowed state governments to create policies that would enable farmers to get licenses to cultivate cannabis for industrial use, that is either for the seed or the fiber, where the seed is used in food products, in cosmetic products, and the fiber in textile products, or for medical use under section 10, where you'd use the leaf in Ayurvedic remedies and formulations. But interestingly enough, you would also be able to use what we call a narcotic, that is the bud or ganja. And what we have seen in the US or Canada, etc., have been part of clinical studies, are being used for medical and therapeutic uses. We realized that there were provisions by which state governments could actually create a policy that would allow for cultivation. So some of the first steps were actually we worked with the chief minister back in the day of Uttarakhand, and we've worked with all the subsequent ones and their senior bureaucracy to actually create a policy for the industrial cultivation of cannabis.
Which
because
year was this?
Even
Which
today,
year was this? Was this immediately into your starting of the journey, or was it a few years into?
No. And that's a great question.
Okay.
In fact,
okay. Let's start
immediately.
there.
Right.
I interjected you. I'd love to know. Okay, yes, you were creating
Sure.
something around policy. Let's finish that. Let's go into the origins. I'm really curious to know, how did you spend your first 2 years? Because I know everything about Boheco from 2017, but not between 2013 and 16. I'll get to that reason. But I interjected you. You were talking to some IAS officers. We'll finish that and then speak about the origins of the first few years. Go on.
And absolutely. I think just to quickly round off on the policy and regulation, over the last 9 years, we started with the state of Uttarakhand, helped them create cultivation policies for hemp, that is for the fiber and for the seed. Now I have worked with almost 6 to 7 state governments to actually enact similar policies. And it also ties back very interestingly to what you mentioned. What did we do in the first couple of years? What did we focused on? We focused on building 3 major engines out. One was around policy and regulation, as I mentioned, working with the stakeholders, creating the laws, understanding the laws. The second was around research, because we realized that one of the biggest problems in India, and it's a problem we still face till today, is that the raw material that is used for hemp seeds or that is used as the cannabis leaf in Ayurvedic formulations isn't cultivated. It is sourced from just natural growing versions of palm. And because of that, the variability in quality, the variability in supply chain, of course, become natural bound issues. So we realized that this needs an agronomic solution. So we tied up with scientific institutes under the Ministry of Science and Technology and began collecting cannabis land races from across India with the goal to begin creating varieties that farmers could actually sow and cultivate for a certain return over the course of time. So we actually, between 2012 and 14, even the government encouraged us to pursue these, and we spent a lot of time on the ground actually collecting, working with the scientists, collecting land races, taking them into the backyard of a government institute and breeding those to say that, okay, this plant's fiber is very good, this plant has come from this state, this plant seed is very good, this has come from this state, and then crossbreed them and then see how they work and then take them to the next stage. So the goal of that was to actually have a seed such that once policies are ready, you'd be in a position to begin cultivating and then solve the biggest supply chain crunch. So we took about 6-7 years. We're sort of at the 98-99% mark that we have some of, I would say, about 20-25 varieties ready to be registered over the course of the next few years. And that really steps up for how from the back end supply is going to work. And the supply is equally matched by a lot of demand, which was the third part of what we built. Because one of the first questions we asked ourselves is, where is the most comfortable place in the hemp value chain for us to begin working? Of course, it can't be something you consume first, because that's where the first risk comes in someone's mind when you're educating them and creating awareness in the consumer. So the best place is let them wear it first. So we spent the first few years actually cracking the value chain around textiles from hemp. So right from the raw fiber, actually we went to the ground in Uttarakhand. We actually worked with about 25 women artisans, 50 women artisans in rural Uttarakhand. This is after the floods, where they would collect the fiber, they would soak it, they would hand ret it, and they would convert it into handloom products, handloom textile products. We then started connecting them with the ecosystem to give them better technology, better resources, give them better training, etc., and took the standard a little higher, and eventually led into a range of different handloom fabrics, handloom garments that we spun out into our own brand called B Label Handloom, which was, I think, the first hemp handloom brand in India back in the day. And it also really led us on a journey of balancing that out with the powerloom side. That's the real hardcore of what we're wearing today. The powerloom, not the khadi version, but the real textile version that we see more predominant. So we began working on the fiber, the cottonized version of the fiber, converting it into yarns and taking it into garments. And we launched Asia's first hemp-based garment label. And it all began with one hemp shirt we had made. It was a crisp white hemp shirt that we had put on sale just to test the market. It was sort of an initial prototype, and it flew off the shelves. I mean, we gave ourselves 6 months. We sold out in, I think, 1.5, 2, and there was a huge demand. And we said, okay, there's some potential here. And around the same time, I remember what we used to do is we used to be very strategic about things. So when we used to make a hemp shirt, we'd also make a hemp kurta and bandi. So whenever we met a member of parliament or a chief minister, we'd give them this in their size. So next time they are going to talk to their friends, they are building the knowledge and awareness indirectly or directly, saying, hey, this is made out of bhang. And that really creates that, I would say, that traction of attention that people are really looking for. Say, oh, bhang, I thought bhang is only limited to Holi and Shivratri. You're telling me it can do this. And it actually happened on the floor. I remember there's a member of parliament who wore a hemp kurta, and he went to the floor of the Lok Sabha and he's talking about hemp textiles and how we need to consider bhang as a strategic crop. And the next thing he knows, after the session, 10 members of parliament from different parties say, oh, this is made of hemp, this is made of bhang. Can you make a kurta? Can you make a bandi for me? My family wants this. So that type of traction and building that awareness was key to it. And a lot of it was on ground, literally boots on the ground, being at farmers markets, being at exhibitions, being at mini conferences, being at sort of show and tells, and really educating people. And beginning, of course, from tier 1 plus, but we were agnostic. We were willing to go to the tier 2,
so you're
tier
telling
3
me that
cities over
an
the course.
ecosystem already existed for this, and that nobody knew about it, and you're the first people, one of the few people to realize that, okay, let's start with shirts. Where was the market for going? I mean, legal hemp, right, was being grown, and it was being exported. Was it being used in internal medicine and Ayurveda? And you realized the potential of making T-shirts within the early days. Was that a key element? You went for FPOs to find out how much is consumed, how much is wasted. So can you tell me what is being wasted, what is being used completely, and how did you get that fiber story out?
You won't believe it, Vishal. Honestly, when it comes to wastage, this was a key topic to our heart, because one thing we realized is there is this wild bhang, this wild hemp that was growing, this fiber in the forest, so to speak, in Uttarakhand. Women artisans collectives had been using it and spinning it with nettle and other natural fibers for decades. But what was so unique was that they had no machinery. So all of this is the most step one version of rough and raw. So to the point where even for normally, how would you separate fiber of cotton or something? You put it in a machine, right? And split it. There they were separated with their teeth. So first of all, they're damaging the health, they're damaging the dental health. And second of all, the quality of the fiber also gets compromised. So as a result of that, there was lack of consistency, the lack of that standardization. And that's what we really brought in, helping them understand how this could be retted better, finding better methods of retting. Retting means essentially what they do is for about 20, 30 days in a year, they take the fiber after it's been harvested and they put it in ice cold water in the river. So basically what it does is it's sort of like it breaks down the enzymes between the outer and the inner fiber and becomes much easier for them to kind of pull out or ret, as they call in the course of time. So combining this ancient knowledge with a little more modernity of separation or a little more modernity of production in terms of understanding what products work. So for example, shawls and stoles, what type of season do they work, what type of markets do they work in, getting them to the markets where, through the course of our I would say partnerships with these collectives and artisan collectives and collector groups, we had them getting to customers in Germany. And what we would do at the back end is, like, whenever our guys would go on the ground, they'd make them do a video call. So finally you see the collector and the woman artisan responsible sitting in a small village in Uttarakhand, and you see the customer sitting in a city in Germany, and really kind of harmonizing that was a key part of it. And as you said, that, like, I think the most important part was being able to generate constant awareness across the value chain. So it's right from the collectors how they could get better consistently, to the point that over the course of time, even the honorable minister and member of parliament from the area, from the district, began to take active interest. We work very closely with him to be able to bring in machinery to assist them. And today there's much more quality offering coming into place, and that led to the attention of the large textile manufacturers, because this was about the time where there was an upswing in more eco-friendly, sustainable. Today those are sort of, I would say, common words, but those days it was in between, the few and far between, and commonality. And that's where really kind of at the back end, a lot of manufacturers, at the front end, a lot of customers were looking for a unique proposition. And what really sold hemp was the quality of it. That, for example, if you were to make a hemp shirt and you're standing in the scorching sun, it's not going to soak completely. It's going to keep you cool inside. It's majorly more durable. It absorbs more UV than cotton. And of course, there's the natural agriculture back end where, it grows in a third of the time, requires a tenth of the water, and, some amazing agriculture benefits too.
I remember you telling me last time that there was something called the Project Chirag that you were working on. And this had roots from there, right?
That's correct.
And so you founders already had a background in working in the rural side of India. And I think if I remember correctly, it was something to do with electricity. The project was on electricity. I correct me if I'm right or wrong there, because I don't know. I think Project Chirag is what I remember from my previous conversation with
You're
you.
right.
And from there on, right? I don't know what electricity, you have to correct me there, right? I thought it was it water-based, the hydroelectricity, was it? Pardon me?
No, so you're absolutely right. In fact, it was solar electrification. What we used to do is that's correct. So what we used to do is we used to get disabled and handicapped populations who had otherwise had trouble finding employment to actually manufacture solar lanterns in India, and be able to supply them to villages that had not had electricity in the ever in the past. Essentially, that's where we started with Project Chirag, and the way it kind of worked for us was essentially we went into the backyard of this. In fact, I remember one of the travels we had was to Rajasthan in the winter, and we had to cross 2 hills, got to a village. And I mean, it was one of the most emotional moments of our life, where we had gone to a village no one goes to, not even the tehsildar, not even the local panchayat, that's about it. And when we crossed a turn, there were dhols going off, and it was the village was out to celebrate that someone has first come all this way. Second, they've come to help us, no strings attached. They just want the best for us. And it's funny enough that we were still sort of city boys. So, we couldn't handle the temperatures. Some of us came down with like fevers and viral fevers and all later. But we still made that journey there, made that back, and it really filled the soul. And that really gave us that, I would say, springboard to push forward into looking into how rural India needs to be the one that has to be strategically activated. Because we're at a point that we need to understand that reverse form of migration and building up tier 2 and tier 3 was as critical, if not continuing to optimize tier 1 cities, where the solutions were in our own backyard, where when we went to rural Uttarakhand, we realized that they were still using the fiber to tie cattle. They were making shawls, they were making sweaters, and this knowledge existed here, but paradoxically the knowledge and awareness didn't exist in cities, or the, I would say, the urban mindset. And we really knew we had to connect those dots, because this was a story worth telling, and most importantly, it is very much worth working with our rural stakeholders to empower them while telling such a story as well. So it's been
No,
very very
this is
interesting.
fascinating for me because I thought you were a bunch of city boys who just went into this. Then I suddenly realized that a few years ago when we met, you had already done this a couple of years prior to this. In a sense, you'd already worked in rural regions because of various stakeholders, right? From farmers, you've also met policy makers also. You also then got into research in 2017 with scientists. I remember you perfectly from that time onwards that you went to a lab, right? Again, I think it's the ICMR lab or something of that sort, and where you
CSIR,
started,
CSIR.
yeah, correct, CSIR labs, and you started building. It's the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, right? You
That's
started
correct.
building an entire story around how hemp should have a scientific community behind it, and that's how it began. And that's also when you also raised the seed round from Ratan Tata and a bunch of people, and you raised about 6 crores plus or something. But that's where I remember you guys on, right? So this journey is interesting. Starts off with 2011 as a project for college goers or somebody who was interested in rural India. Then go abroad, understand the benefits of hemp, come back to India, build an ecosystem around it, start selling T-shirts, right? Or let's not say T-shirts, it's shirts, and then from there on, get into several other products. I want to start off with that moment when you went to CSIR, right? And then how did everything change from there? Because today you're a very well-known D2C platform, right? You've got several brands under you, right? I'm very curious to know that journey today. So let's start off. Where do we start? Because there's so many things you've done in 9 years, so many things and so many beautiful things. Do you want to start off with the new products added and how we met Ratan Tata and others and how it started? Go ahead.
Sure. Sure. I'd be happy to. I think that's sort of in the same time window, as mentioned, that we've partnered up with CSR a lot for the back end of research, actually breeding cannabis, studying varieties, high THC, high CBD, high fiber, high seed, etc. But a lot of that kicked off because of the work we did with government, where they encouraged us to be a first industry stakeholder in the meeting. We met with the scientists, researchers. They understood the value of this. We, in fact, one of our first employee at the company was a plant breeder and principal scientist who formerly worked with the government as well, and he actually bred different medical plant varieties, bred sort of opium varieties that went into pharmaceutical grade use, and was looking to be able to create a similar ecosystem around cannabis. And it was in the same time window. I remember we had met Mr. Tata at an event organized by X Prize. I think X Prize was launching in India at that time. They had an event at what was then the Blue Frog in Mumbai, in Low Parel, and we were invited thanks to a lot of networks that we had built, and sort of a lot of advisors and mentors. And we turned up at the event. We just expected to be learning there. We always like sponges to try and learn. And lo and behold, Mr. Tata sitting front row. You had Mr. Peter Diamandis from Singularity University right next to him. So it is one of those star-struck moments for entrepreneurs. And I fortunately got a chance. I was brave enough. I got a chance. I went up to him, introduced myself as a Parsi working in agriculture, working with cannabis and hemp, and immediately piqued his curiosity and attention. And he shared his contact details and please connect with me. But this is the start of it. Every single month for 8 months, I consistently and politely followed up with his office, who are absolutely wonderful to deal with. It took 8 months to actually get a short window on his calendar. We got the window, and we were told before that look, when you meet Mr. Tata, and this was his early days of angel investments. He had, he was still becoming seasoned from an angel investment point of view. And we told one thing very clearly: don't expect to meet him. You'll meet his advisors. Everyone who he counts on and depends on, you'll meet them first. So it's okay, fine. We prepare ourselves mentally that this is who we're going to meet. We talk data, we talk numbers, we talk story, we connect the dots. We land up at the office. First thing we see, what immediately relaxes us, is right at the middle of the office. Mr. Tata's dog is lying down and relaxing. I said, okay, immediately we're comfortable because we all love dogs, all dog friendly people. So I'll sit down and we're waiting for our meeting. And we think, okay, 10, 15 minutes. And we look inside and we realize the meeting isn't with his advisors. It's with Mr. Tata himself. And we sat with him for 3 hours and explained every single thing we're doing. What is the vision? What is the goal? How it can break into fiber and the seed, the medical avenue. And I know he was completely supportive as the man with the vision that he has. He knew about this. He traveled, he learned about this, very learned, very educated from the United States, from China, from other countries. He said, India must be doing this. So we were very fortunate to receive his personal investment and at that time a grant from the Tata Trust to fund a lot of our research work back in the day. He still continues to be an advisor and mentor to us that whenever we can count on, he's always there for us. And he's always guided us on, making the right decisions and the right calls. That, for example, one of India's first human-grade clinical studies on medical use of cannabis. We have currently, I think, 5 or 6 clinical studies at Boheco's end. They're the only human-grade clinical studies on cannabis-based medicines in India. 4 of them are being done at the National Institute of Ayurveda in Jaipur, where we use our licensed cannabis leaf-based Ayurvedic medicines. The 5th one is a very little unusual one, where we use the cannabis flower, what I would refer to as ganja. But because it doesn't grow legally in India, we had to import it from the Netherlands, the Ministry of Health in Netherlands. Basically, the goal of that trial was that we partnered up with Tata Memorial Hospital and the main director to conduct a study to see how this cannabis works when vaporized on breast cancer patients. Because there's a huge belief in the oncological community that cannabis has some importance, that we need to see where it is, whether it's in pain, whether it's in appetite, whether it's in sleep. And that's something we are actively also exploring on the ground at Boheco. And to get that meeting with Tata Memorial Center, again, Mr. Tata was the savior. He connected us directly with the director. The director gave us 2-3 hours of his time, understood our vision of what we want to do. In fact, became a part of a panel discussion of the first cannabis conference we had organized a year later after that, where him, senior doctors from AIMS, ministers, DCGIs, all on the same stage saying, yes, we need cannabis's medical use to be expanded. So he's absolutely been a guiding light and a shining light for us. The likes of him, Mr. Anandan, Rajan Anandan as well, and along with a lot of our sort of early day seed investors, given us a lot of kind of impetus to move forward. Where as an entrepreneur, some days are difficult, but when you realize that you're working to be able to share good news and the tough news in equal right with all your shareholders, all your partners, all your mentors, it feels much better. It's more cathartic as well.
That's a lovely insight that most of you focus on data, the narrative, right? You focus on what your vision, which is very important, right? A lot of the entrepreneurs miss that when they meet such doyens. I think they would have brought in to the vision and the fact that you've put in your groundwork and your, if I may say so, you guys were grounded in science. You knew what you wanted to do with this thing, right? So I think nobody could say no to you, right? They just said yes. And I think that was a 6.5 crore or 6.25, I think, if I'm correct. At the time, I was covering that news. I remember it. And once that happened, you've got into so many things. Again, correct me. Feel free to correct me. You started launching products in pain management. I think you've done stress, muscle, right? You also talked about the benefits of seed oil, right? And you started talking about nutrition as well, right? That was the journey you started taking. From now, you went from fiber to using the seed for many things, right? How was
That's correct.
How was that journey? How did you progress from, say, pardon me again, a manufacturer of shirts who you'd outsource to somebody, get it manufactured, to getting into medicine and science? How did that happen?
I think that's a great question, Vishal. The actual pivot around this was around 2017-18. And a lot of it was structured around how the laws were in place. As I mentioned, the leaf and the seed were excluded from the definition of narcotic, the cannabis leaf and the seed. But it was over the course of time that in certain states, we actually became one of the first companies to go and apply and actually get a license from a state government in Madhya Pradesh to manufacture the seeds legally as an Ayurvedic proprietary medicine/food, and also use the leaf, what we call bhang, and manufacture proprietary Ayurvedic medicines. This was around 2017-18 when we realized that whilst textile was sort of a growing avenue and advent, it was a low margin business, high volume business where the supply chain was still being built. It had yet to be mature to the large level where it could actually cater to the large capacities of your, I would say, your massive textile firms, organizations that want to manufacture it for global brands, etc. But what was a unique opportunity, and we realized this over the course, was whilst working in the segment and while getting access to some of the first licenses for hemp food-based products. That's the seed oil, and the protein, which are very rich in omegas, amino acids, protein, fatty acids, on par, if not better than your flax seeds and your chia seeds of the world, as well as using the cannabis leaf products where you have CBD and THC, the two cannabinoids that are very commonly used in a medical setting globally. We realized one very interesting thing around that period. India had an Ayurvedic traditional medicine pathway for using the leaf and the seed. But whilst we did that, China had the same pathway through traditional Chinese medicine. They had been exploring for years and years. And in the same year, Thailand had also opened up its laws for Thai traditional medicine from the leaf and the seed. So I believe it gave a lot of positive impulse to the regulators that this must be encouraged. So that's why we really pivoted towards this, because we realized actually impacting, because by that time awareness had built to a certain zenith. We had reached several thousand customers, we had several thousand users, we had a lot of people thronging at the door saying, hi, when are you working with hemp health-based products or wellness-based products? We would love to be able to explore these with you. So what we did was we got these licenses, we came out with products. In fact, today we have one of the largest range of products, as I mentioned, hemp food-based products from the seed, as well as cannabis leaf-based formulations. So we have consumption ones for pain and stress management. Those are, because their consumption, they contain cannabis, they go under prescription. So we work with thousands of Ayush doctors across the country, Ayurvedic doctors, as well as modern medicine doctors who prescribe these medicines to their patients. And they're seeing a great effect, whether from end stage cancer to early stage fibromyalgia. All of the entire spectrum of almost 50-55 indication areas are products, both topical products for arthritis pain, muscle relief, skin health, as well as these consumption products for pain and stress management. Which we've seen, I would say, enormous uptick in terms of demand, of consumer awareness, and a lot of it is thanks to hyper digitization. People are naturally much more aware over the last 5-6 years, just by sheer amount of reading they do online, that it helps, it helps build, accelerate a lot of what we aim to do in terms of creating and enhancing that awareness. So that's why even when we pivoted in 17-18, we weren't sure. We said, okay, let's see how we go. Let's keep it balanced out 50-50. But today it's 70-80% health and wellness focus at Boheco. We have about 30-40% of a lot of our textile businesses that are legacy businesses we built. And in a way, we sort of structured ourselves to build up to a future first conglomerate across divisions, but with a core focus around health and wellness, where actually driving into consumers and patients, we realized is where the value needs to be added. And it's important to not just value add without data. It's important to generate data and information to show how it's safe, how it's not toxic, how it actually works. And that's what we actually did. We actually partnered with clinical institutes. Say we have a product for arthritis pain. That's a topical product.
Yeah.
Now, in real world use case, we have doctors prescribing it left, right, and center. In fact, offline, we have it stocked in Novel Plus. We have a store in Bangalore, etc. that we stock it in. We have great patients and customers.
Just to interject, how many stores are you in today?
I would say we are in upwards of close to about 90 stores across the country. Okay. And it's touching 100 within, I would say, the end of the financial year as well. A lot of pharmacy chains, a lot of clinics, a lot of, sort of offline means retail as well. Because you realize that it's important to get into the hinterland. We conquer the 5-7%, the 10% on the online and the D2C. And that, of course, is an organic evolution. But the offline is where the real growth story comes from. And we need to kind of balance those scales out. And the best way to do so is tell them that this product that I have, ये जो product है, इसका trial मैंने किया. I've done a clinical study of this. I've done it in Jaipur. Here's the evidence. And immediately doctors are like, oh, I need this, because a thing like arthritis is not curable. It's an autoimmune disorder. So the best you can do is manage and contain, and occasionally medicines don't work. Like, I give an example. We had one lady patient. She's 83 years old. For 40 years, she lived with arthritis pain. And she came to one of our doctors and said, here, take this oil and just try it out. She turns up at his clinic at 11 o'clock at night in Bombay, and I get a frantic call from one of my colleagues saying, Jahan, doctors called me to his clinic. I'm worried. I say, you just go, you will figure it out. And he calls me, spring in his steps afterwards, saying, that lady called and said, what magic potion have you given me? I have never, why didn't you give me this earlier in my life? He said, it's only because it wasn't available. Now it's available. We can make it more accessible. And that's who we want to get to. Of course, the young, urban,
No,
folks know
that's
it.
your get a fix moment, right? It's a brilliant, right? I really like the magic potion analogy to this. I'm a fan of asterisks, and I agree. I mean, who wouldn't want to celebrate such a thing? I'm glad. So there's, ladies and gentlemen, they are boheco.in. So check out all the products, their pain, stress. They have arthritis, and they have other forms of nutrition. Today, how much of this has overtaken the textile business? Is it big?
It's about a 70-30 split. 70 about hemp and wellness and 30 about textiles. But the goal is to grow the pie. We know the market is still growing, it's still budding. The theoretical market size is still a far distance away from the actual market realization today. Hemp and wellness market is realized at only about $8 to $10 million. The goal is to grow that entire segment to close to about $400-500 million, where you have hundreds of millions of arthritis patients, you have millions of cancer patients, you have millions of cannabis users in India who are just using the illicit version for their medical use because they cannot get access to a medical product. If these needs and if these gaps are able to be met, that really helps solve a huge amount of the problem we face as companies as well as the regulators face.
Okay, and these and that's I'm glad you said that you had to pivot into this because the larger market. Do you have to have a license in each state?
For these products, no, not a license for distribution, only a license for manufacturing. It's all India distribution. In fact, our products are sold all the way from Mumbai to New Delhi to Shillong. From last count, I remember this the last person we put who's come offline, and we had a great response to this. Yeah.
I don't know how you're going to ask the next question. I still remember in 2017 when I met some of the folks from your team, they were saying that the revenues were 1 crore. I think they've grown significantly since. It's been 6 years. What happened during the COVID? Did a lot of people sitting at home need to have stress management? So you have products for stress management as well. I think we should put it out there. How did the COVID change the business, number one? You also did a fundraise of 2 million last year, right? And I think the revenues have grown significantly. Feel free to tell us how much it is or where you're heading towards a vision. And the fact that D2C has arrived in India in a big way. It only started after COVID. Before COVID, all of them, I think only few brands had crossed about 100 crores of revenues. Now everyone seems to be getting there because D2C is a story which is here to stay. Right? You want to comment on these things, the fundraise that happened, the larger round, and the fact that COVID happened, stress management became an issue, people staying at home. Was that a calling card for you in a sense? Say, look, we have products like this. Why don't you order? How did the marketing happen? How did the narrative happen? And finally, the vision towards the scale. And do you want to remain just a brand or also, because you started off with farmers, I'm asking this, are you going to be also setting up your own manufacturing? That's something I want
to That's great. Thank you so much for that, Vishal. I think when it comes to COVID, COVID catalyzed, honestly, a lot of thought in the mind of consumers, patients. In fact, right from when we first began, every single year on year, we've grown between 30 to 45%, including during COVID, when everyone else registered degrowth in our sort of similar segments around, the D2C wellness side of it, being able to cater to the pain side of it, being able to cater to sort of a certain indication areas. We were showing massive growth as well. Now, I think we were at about 1 crore or so, we've grown, I would say, now we're close to closing at almost about $1 million, $800,000 as well. So about 5 or 6 crore. The next goal next year is a couple of $1 million, and every year it's about 30 to 45% growth consistently that we're seeing. And the beauty is the picture has only just begun. For example, at our end, we have a range of 15 other products that are going to come out over the next 12 to 15 years. And a lot of them have come from learning about what really works in D2C, having studied the bigger brands, studied the upcoming and burgeoning brands, and understanding what are the customers looking for. Because COVID, as you said, the one thing we realized during COVID was there was inevitably the COVID-19 storm, but there were mini storms and typhoons around it. One of it was around mental health, around stress, around anxiety. Where people, I remember we had this elderly gentleman, one of our customers from out in the East. He was having difficulty sleeping post-COVID, was on clonazepam, a couple of benzodiazepines. It wasn't working. And he was sick. He was tired of it. He said, I need something that really helps me because I'm facing too many side effects. And we provided him with one of our stress management formulations. And he's immediately moved to that. He's gotten all his friends who are on the similar medication around that. Today, it's even mental health professional counselors who are contacting us saying, hey, do you have something that can help my patients? Because, one of the things we've come so far along in this, in the COVID story that, one of the things that just only beckons at the distance of the mind is when we started, even conventional medicines or conventional treatment for the first 6 months were inaccessible to many people. People were not able to get out of their homes or go to hospitals or go for treatment or, manage themselves. And they had to resort to home remedies, or they had to resort to something that helps them with their immunity, helps them with their inflammation. In fact, during COVID, we launched one of our products as an immunity booster that combined hemp seed oil with a little bit of ashwagandha, giloy, haldi, amla, and it was a great seller.
The immunity booster, right? Today. The immunity booster.
Absolutely.
Does that cover gut health too, in a way? I'm just asking because I have problems with the gut, hence asking. Is that something that hemp can solve also? Or, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not finding a reason to have hemp, but I have problems. So go on, Jahan. Do you think it's a good thing for gut health too?
Absolutely. It improves gut health manifold. In fact, I'd be very happy to share with you, Vishal. We have a product coming up maybe in about a month and a half that is specifically for gut health, for IBS, IBD, other gut-based issues and around digestive health. In fact, I'm happy to share. Today itself, I just got notice that the clinical trial for that has also been registered in Jaipur for the product where we're combining the cannabis leaf with other ingredients in Ayurveda that are extremely good for your gut microbiome and really kind of study the data and show people that this is working in this real time. So currently our hemp seed oil and immunity is fantastic. And we have something that is sort of an upgrade on that coming soon as well. So you'll be the first to know on this.
I'd love to subscribe for that. But I also want to know, I'm glad you mentioned that you do trials for this. I think a lot of people should realize that a lot of your products before they're launched, you go through clinical trials. You want to talk about robustness of it and why that's important to you, why data is important to you. And because we're building an India that's transparent, that's credible, right? We're talking about India that wants to live healthier, right? How did you set that narrative? How difficult was that?
In fact, I think it fit quite seamlessly into the narrative the government was looking to adopt, because right from the get-go, when ICMR and the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission was creating a monograph on cannabis and medical cannabis, we were the only industry partner invited thanks to a lot of the research and efforts we did. Similarly, when we worked at CSIR Institute, some of the first to be commissioned to look at the medical use, we were always first at the door, first exploring. So it really helped build our knowledge base. Today, our entire research team is led by an Ayurvedic doctor, a phytochemist, or natural product chemist, previously with Himalaya and a couple of other Ayurvedic companies, as well as a pharmacologist with combined of 60 years of experience. That really helped shape things up. Because I think, one of the best lessons is to always find people who are better than you and more experienced than you to actually build out a strong team. That really helped build a lot of the forethought and strategy of generating data around how cannabis is safe, how it's not toxic, and how it works. So it's how it's efficacious. So we are the first, some of the first animal model studies where we actually gave white mice and rats cannabis extract to show that it's not toxic, even at high doses. So that, it immediately leads to that credibility in a doctor's mind that, okay, I can give this to my patient. We also started working with CSIR institutes to say, okay, can you see how much cannabis is in this? How much CBD? How much THC? We started generating analytical certificates to show there's, no impurities, no insecticides, pesticides, actually doing those reports and generating that transparency, as you correctly said, because it is that is going to sell. Because at the end of the day, it's your doctors and practitioners, your medical key opinion leaders that will take to this if they believe in it. And you have to give them enough evidence to show it works. And equally so, we live in a hyper aware society, as you mentioned, where people want this information, where we still have customers and patients saying, hey, can you show me the link to the clinical study of this product? So today we have 4 studies. I mentioned one is on arthritis, one's on eczema, one's on stress and anxiety post-COVID, interestingly enough, and one is on IBS and IBD. And a couple have completed, couple are just starting, but people always want to know more and more about this. And we realize it's important to build that bank of information.
Okay. And what about the side effects? Do people ask you about the side effects? I'm sure people
Absolutely.
overconsume at times. So I would love to know side effects too.
Absolutely. And it's a very important fallacy that a lot of wellness brands need themselves to proactively break, that nothing has no side effects. Everything has a side effect. It's important for you to know what they are, to have understood where they come at what levels, and to help the patient and the doctor know what is the best solution to be able to mitigate those side effects. So, for example, THC that exists within the leaf extract, if you take too much as anxiogenic, it rather than being anxiolytic or calming anxiety, it creates anxiety. So it's important to have the right amount of titration. That if doctor says have 4 drops, don't have 20 drops. Because that will set you over the top. We've had people who have had a lot of drowsiness, a lot of fatigue. Of course, colloquially known as the munchies, but appetite stimulation is a big part of it. And what is sort of goose for one is gander for the other, right? That for one person for whom it's a recreational illicit effect, another person it's a desired effect. So being able to balance those skills is a very key part of it, and helping people be aware that if you are not careful, this could happen. If this happens, please take these precautions. And if you are still not satisfied, please ensure you discontinue this for this period of time. Don't take it every single day. No medicine is supposed to be taken as a prophylactic every single day. Take it when your body needs it. So building that education, in fact, till today, we actually do CMEs, that is medical education awareness events. We've done almost 30 with doctors across the country, educating them, patients across the country, so people know what to expect when they're getting into it.
No, this is phenomenal. Thank you for that honesty. And by the way, I've always maintained that D2C companies are also about stories, and they have to tell stories, and stories are important, right? For example, I'm going to talk the nice sides of hemp. You can also make your cakes with the hemp if you wanted. And if you're a South Indian and you like upma, you can also do hemp upma. That's an interesting thing. That's because of all my previous conversations I remember, and I'm sure you can do much more. And you should check out some of the blogs. I've seen those blogs and on the recipes, and they're phenomenal. Is that something that's vaguely put out there saying that, is that a narrative or is it real? Can you really cook a banana walnut cake with hemp?
100%, 100 without getting high. I'll explain you how.
Without getting high is a great answer. Go on, go for it.
So all of it comes from the hemp seed. Okay, so the hemp seed has no narcotic value. It's all your health foods. Think of it like your flax and seed and pumpkin seed. So the seed creates a seed oil, and if you crush the seed right, you can create a protein powder. Like in our home, we use the powder from the seed to make chapatis. And of course, none of us get high. We're all sober folks at home, sort of straight and narrow. But it's been so helpful from a vegetable protein source that we were blown away. Even though being the promoters of the company, we're now consumers of our own food products, and we're realizing this. Like a lot of the things we participate in. I remember the first hemp burger was made in Mumbai at I think Kelvin Chung, who used to be is a famous chef. He started one of his first restaurants. I can't remember the name, and it just took off. It just now today you have hemp cafes in Kasol, and people are making sandwiches and pastas and all of this. And the best part is the will I get high has changed from being a prohibitive initial narrative to the flow of the discussion being, no, you won't get high. This will help you get healthy, to actually being an icebreaker that ropes people in. Because then people are curious. And people, like I remember I was in Jaipur for an expo just 2 weeks ago on the ground, educating people. That's the common public. And it felt like the old days. That same thing we did in Mumbai, we're doing in Jaipur today. We did in Mumbai yesterday. And you're giving them hemp seeds in their hand. Some people will say, oh, bhang, I don't want to touch it. I want to get high. Some people are willing to listen and say, oh, interesting. This actually tastes like the seed. This actually is quite nutty. In fact, to the point that, you had athletes and runners who came back the next day saying, can I buy 2 kgs of this off you? And he said, okay, hold your horses. We don't have that much. We'll send it to you. But yeah. So it absolutely works, and it's super, super healthy for you.
Okay. Do you believe in celebrity marketing, or would you believe in organic growth by storytelling as a T2C brand?
I think it's a mixture of both. Honestly, when it comes to celebrities, a scattergun approach never works. And, I think that's something we are realizing studying D2C brands. A much more methodical approach to identify thought leaders who are able to drive traction specifically in objectively around audiences that would be right up your alley, would be willing to listen to your messaging, has become even more critical today. For example, having someone from an art and culture field explain medicine and science and technology it's just not a natural fit. But having someone who has the wherewithal, who has the experience, who has the maturity, being able to explain that narrative is a key part of it. And I think that also needs to be counterbalanced with real people and real emotions coming out in real stories. It's a lot of it is built on empathy, where a lot of the movements even we're seeing with Cuckoo FM, down into the tier 2, tier 3, a lot of it is built on empathy. People are listening to stories that they feel or they've heard or they've experienced. Once you're able to crack that and be able to combine these two, then sky's the limit. So I think it's a lot of, a two-pedal approach, counterbalance approach on these two.
I think you seem to like the storytelling more than the celebrity spray and pray kind of a campaign, right? I think it's a balance, yes, but you're saying that a brand should tell stories transparently with the users, and that works best today.
I think it's not, it's maybe not as binary even when we first thought of it, because some audiences love storytelling, but some of them don't have the attention span or they don't want to spend time on it at the end of a day. Let's be honest. They want 2 seconds, something that catches their attention, someone who they're going to listen to, someone whom they admire. That is where having sort of the first approach, and as you said, not spray and pray. It has to be very, very tactical, and being able to step up towards an approach rather than having 15 people talking about the same thing to a common group. Having a methodical calendar pre-scheduled approach offers, I would say, incrementally more value to companies.
Okay. And today, are you doing more of a consignment kind of an approach with the retailers, or is it mostly a cash and carry kind of an approach? What is the type of business that you're following in the distribution? It's a very brutal ecosystem, India, right? Mostly trade margins, and mostly credit cycles are long. Is that a game that you want to do? Is D2C a large part of that? I know distribution gives you that scale in India, but do you think you still have to focus on the online before going into massive retail expansion?
No, absolutely. I think online, takes you to up to a certain zenith. After that, offline is an inevitability in India, because it's still where maybe about half a generation away from active, complete consumer awareness, even down into, say, Chakrata in Uttarakhand or Firozpur in Punjab, till that level. To be able to get to that and be able to speak that language, be able to drive the volumes, that becomes critical. So we have a very, because we understand, and the way we like to look at it is India is not one country. It is one body with one landmass with almost 29 to 30 different countries. Everyone has their own style of operating, their own language, their own culture. So we have to be able to customize. So, for example, we have multi-models. One of our models in terms of in Karnataka is on a franchise approach, where we're working with the representative as a person who's taken the franchise and the distributorship for that region. In other areas, it's more consignment/distributorship, but in smaller pockets where you need to have sort of like a bit of a cash and carry approach and more sort of just in time enablement of distribution, that we're slowly kind of growing out the pockets and segments, because you have to be a bit careful around the segments of how cash flow is going to be maintained in a positive manner, because I would say the repayment cycles need to be considered. I would say you have to consider the macroeconomic environment, the income dispensability of it, whether even a retailer, whether even you're a super stockist or a stockist, how quickly the timeline and cycle is going to be, because COVID did disrupt that. What was 30 days became 90 days. What was 45 days became 120 days. And being able to stabilize that is a key part of what we drive a lot of the strategy at the management backend. But we realize we have to have a multi-fold approach, where it depends on the geography we go, the partners we find. And that's where even today, we're in talks with different types of models in, I think, almost 4 different states right now, to see whether we work on a consignment basis, distributors, super stockist basis, just on ground retail basis, where we just provide them the goods and let them figure it out, whether we work on per good basis and we issue the dispatch. We've realized that it'll take years to harmonize, but we will need to build up to those till that year when it harmonizes. And the best way to do that is find what works best and what is a good form fit that doesn't, I would say, compromise your margins by a significant amount, where it leaves you enough gross margin at the end of the day that you have room for marketing and distribution. You have room for a little bit of creativity from a management sense, where you're not down to the bare pennies at the end of the day, that you can maneuver a little bit.
So you have control over the farms, you control over the manufacturing. The piece is retail that you have to solve. D2C you have control over, because you know where you can launch, you can do test markets and then probably go into retail, right? How many retail stores are you at, Jahan, today?
I would say retail, as mentioned, is somewhere between about 90 to 100 right now.
Okay.
This includes all offline
Yeah.
retail stores spread across Mumbai, Delhi, Shillong, Chennai,
Nice.
Bangalore, Indore, parts of Uttar Pradesh, parts of Uttarakhand, Punjab. I would say almost about 10 to 11 states we're in, and almost about 100 plus retail stores. But the goal is to keep growing that, because today,
Okay.
I mean, the demand that we're coming even from larger chains, I won't name any right now, but there's such larger chains which have 50 chains or 100 chains saying, I want this product. My customers and
Nice.
patients, because they won't come till there is not enough demand. And now there's such a surge in demand that they're inevitably coming. And it leads a lot back to COVID being an age where people made themselves aware and said, where can I get something? I will find it myself. It's not just my son or my grandson. I will go online and find it myself. My friend told me that this is what they use in the United States. Can I use it and find it here? And that is how a lot of this traction is building organically as well. And is leading to a lot of kind of even hyper inorganic growth, because others know, and then others know, and then others know. And I mean, it's very, very fascinating.
Okay, can I take these products from India to the US, or are you going to be exporting there soon?
So we already export to 15 countries. We export our hemp seed products. In fact, I think, funnily enough, we are the first hemp company in the world to export hemp seed oil to Saudi Arabia, because they love it for their cosmetics, and we get a constant demand every couple of months from there. They also started using it in some of their scents, their attars, as a base oil, and it's been fantastic. We also export to Australia, Trinidad and Tobago, some of the European countries. The next horizon is US and Canada. When it comes to hemp food products, yes, absolutely, you can take it. When it's the cannabis leaf formulations, it's a bit trickier, because every country has its own import regulation for medical cannabis. So depending on the country, there are certain forms or certain documents or compliance you need to do. Some countries allow it, some countries don't. But the next frontier is being able to break through those import laws and
Okay.
reach out to the very west.
So can I take an arthritis oil to the USA, for example? I can.
Yes, shouldn't be a problem.
Shouldn't be a problem. That's interesting. The reason I ask is I'm sure a lot of people would watch this interview and say that, can I order it from boheco.in, right? You do export. That's an interesting thing. But do you ship to the US? You do.
Yes, yes. We ship to the US. We have shipped in the past for several of our orders. So yes, that is something we continue to do.
Okay. Okay. I have a few more questions. You'll raise 2 million from a lot of family offices. That must have
That's
certainly
correct.
changed your life. The first round was great, but the second round is a larger round. What does it do to the founders? I mean, you have more time invested into the product. The reason I ask this is because you just started off the journey paying yourself very little. It's a 9-year journey. It's almost like, you're almost like watching something grow and you're taking very little from it. Does that change with the fundraise, or still would you say that it's still small, that because most of it is still going into product and it's only in the next
It is.
subsequent round? Yeah, it is. Okay, go for it. Tell
It
me.
is the latter. Honestly, I mean, as founders, we've always had this gentleman's altruism that flows through our veins, where we would rather capital go into growing something, and beyond our communities. In fact, as you mentioned, we bootstrapped ourselves. Even today, we just take nominal salaries for a lot of, and even all of us are bound by KPIs, KRAs. We actually have to meet targets. It's not a sort of laid back approach. The 2 million capital has given us a lot more rocket fuel, I would say. But the rocket fuel to grow the team, grow the products, do more trials, actually begin cultivating medical grade cannabis on a large scale, enhance manufacturing, get more content, get more customers. And we're very fortunate, even the investors we raised from come from a similar strategic mindset, whether one of them being, the founder and promoter of a listed Canadian cannabis company that actually listed in the markets and was eventually acquired, who understands how the market thinks, who understands how the market works, of Indian origin, family offices of some of the top FMCG and CPG companies, some of the top alcobev and solar renewable energy manufacturers. So that gives us that alternative tilt to have sort of an asymmetrical approach, because we realize symmetrical and conventional won't work when we're looking at it. And that's why asymmetry towards growth is very, very critical in this unique space we're in. But from a sort of a founder point of view, we're still, whatever we've received continues to just be plowed back into the company to expand the team. We went from, I think, 7 founders, 8. And as I mentioned, we hired 1 employee back in the day. Now we're a team of almost 35 of us from across the entire spectrum, from operations, legal, manufacturing, your marketing, your product, your research, your administration. It's a whole sort of plethora of a community, a family built at Boheco. And the goal is to keep building the family and keep driving growth with this family. And we realized we're at that inflection point now, that when we started, we're the only company. Today, there are almost 60 plus hemp and cannabis companies in India.
I was about to get to that.
It's
There are quite a lot of them now.
exactly. And now is the time to, over the last few years, we've refined the focus, but now is the time to accelerate as quickly as possible, because now we know where we need to get to, whether it's different products, whether it's different types of consumers, different channels of distribution. We know what it will take for us to, because we went 0 to 1, but now the 1 to 100 journey commenced in just before Series A. And we realized to keep it to 100, as founders, we have to continue giving back. That's always been the mantra. We keep giving back whatever the best we've gotten, and touch wood has led us, to a good journey so far as well.
Are you privy to sharing numbers of your revenues today, as of March 2021 or 2022? How much would you close at? Is it growing?
I'll have to check the final numbers, because the last week is a bit important from our side, and I know what my founders will give me a lot of stick if in case I don't factor it in. But I will say,
go on. Take a dig for it. We'll tell the other founder to forgive you.
So no, what I can say is we closed last year, the last financial year, at about 3.5, 3.6. This year is comfortable 35 to 45% growth on that.
That's nice.
Is what we know.
No, very nice. And listen, now, since we're talking about getting high and staying healthy, right? What is your 30-second guide to happiness?
I would say 30-second guide to happiness is embrace the relationships around you, and embrace, I would say, the thoughts that linger at the back of your mind of new ideas, new innovations. Don't let them get buried. It's very, very easy to do that. I think building a safe space for you to be able to think comfortably and articulate comfortably is the ultimate guide. And I think I learned this firsthand over COVID myself, that when you're with the right people in the right environment, the right ideas continue to flow. And I'll say the last one, I mean, I'm a spiritual person. I would always say, if the idea is audacious enough, just say it out aloud. Even if you're alone in a room, the universe is listening. It may not give it to you immediately or even eventually, but it may give you some version of it. And it's worth that chance. There's nothing to lose. Put it out in the universe. You never know how it comes back to you.
I'd agree with you. And, I take a lot of positivity, and I'm going to try out some of your brands, especially for the gut. Immunity is very important, and I'm going to try it out. I'm going to give you feedback on that. I also want to know what you read, or who do you get influenced by? Are you a person who's easily influenced? Who mentors you? So if you could recommend books, if you could tell me who are your mentors, if you could tell me about art and documentaries that inspired you, I'd be very happy to close on that note.
Sure. I'd be very happy to share more on that. I think, one person that really, it's myself and my wife both. I think it really, two folks that really caught our attention over the past few years is Yuval Noah Harari, naturally, just for his sheer progressive mind.
Thinking.
Yeah, the thought process. Because, you just put yourself in the shoes at the end mile of what he's talking about, and you see it happening. You see the small changes in the path of destiny of the future we have as a world. And it's important to be able to be mindful of, what such folks say. Similarly, I'll say Naval Ravikant has been great inspiration for his thought. I think, these are two folks who are men ahead of their time in terms of how they're thinking. And, someone put it out on Twitter recently that, we have the historical philosophers' scrolls and texts. Maybe we need to start building our version now that will be the historical versions in the future. These great minds, we need to be able to be archiving and relating in practicality. And I think another one was, of course, Tristan Harris, formerly of Facebook, who's thought about how we need to be viewing technology is very critical as well. These are a couple of books I'd say. I'm been a voracious reader since I was 2 years old. So anything I see, I pick up and I read as well. And especially from a mentor point of view, I think a lot of the mentorship and guidance comes from family first. Being able to be open with your loved ones about the highs and lows. Of course, it's great to share the highs, but when you share the troughs of the wave as well, it's equally important, because there's always an insight awaiting that you would never otherwise gotten. And being able to create a safe space amongst founders to be able to be honest and open and have that communication that, regardless, without judgment, putting friendship aside, where does this stand? What do we do here? Let's be candid. Let's have candor as part of that. I think that is sort of really helps sort of guide how I think and live as well. And I'd say, a lot of it also stems from the mentors like Mr. Tata, a couple of the other investors, advisors who kind of came on board. We have a couple of narcotic commissioners, for folks who are formerly with Apple, folks who are formerly Snapdeal Housing, who give us an insight that I may not be able to find in a book. And they'd be able to be, raw, truthful, honest. Because as an entrepreneur, where you're going from startup to SME, as you said, and then looking to take it to the next phase of the rocket ship, it's important to have that perspective of someone who's been there, who's done that, who understands the motions and the mechanisms. Maybe not entirely, but just enough to give you an insight you wouldn't have had otherwise.
No, that's wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what happens when you combine cannabis and science. You get Boheco, and that's what we've learned today. And that's Jahan, Peston, Jamas, who's told us about the Boheco company. It's boheco.in, and there's also boheco.org for you to be informed on the company. Go check out both these websites, and we'll be talking to them more often. And we have lots to learn. And I think today has been a fascinating discussion. And you don't have to be high to know science. That's what they brought in today, right? So Jahan, all the best to you, right? And I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for being on the upstreamlife.com.
Thank you so much for having us, Vishal. It's been a great pleasure, and looking forward to more such riveting conversations for the future as well.